The coins went down in rows, the way people count when counting is all they have left. Quarters first, lined up like small soldiers. Then dimes. Then a $5 bill folded so many times it had gone soft as cloth. The young mother at the counter of Stanek's pharmacy stacked them beside the register with steady hands, because her hands were the only part of her still pretending this was fine. Behind the counter, the white paper bag sat under the lamp, a prescription stapled to it, an inhaler for a 6-year-old boy. Close enough to touch, not paid for yet. "You're still $11 short, sweetheart," the text said, as quiet as she could make it. She said it kindly. There is no kind way to say it. Somewhere back in the line, a man exhaled through his nose, loud enough to be meant. "Some of us have somewhere to be," he said to nobody, which meant he said it to her. The mother's face did not move. Mothers learn that early. She reached for the bag to slide it back, to say she would come back later. Later being the word people use when they mean they do not know how. Her hands were not steady anymore. Then the man standing behind her, a tall figure in a faded delivery jacket, leaned past her shoulder toward the pharmacist. He said something too low for the line to hear. Maybe 10 words. The old pharmacist looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, the way people nod in church, when the thing being agreed to is bigger than the room. The register beeped. "Put your coins away," the text said. "You're covered. You've been covered here for a long time." The mother stared at her. Then she looked down at the receipt the tech pressed into her hand. Where a balance should have been, where the numbers should have sat in their neat, accusing column, there was a single handwritten word. Lena. She made it to the door before the crying began. She did not make it any farther than that. Before this story is over, you will know what that whisper was, and why a stranger's receipt could break a grown woman down in a doorway. Stay with it until the end. The answer is older than the coins on that counter. 2 weeks earlier, the man in the faded jacket was doing what he did every day, which was almost nothing anyone would ever notice. His name was Sam Delaney, and he was 36 years old, and he drove a parts and supply route through the kind of neighborhood that maps remembered and money forgot. Medical crates, pharmacy stock, boxes of gauze and glucose strips, and the small brown bottles that keep a neighborhood upright. He clocked in at 10 minutes to 5 in the morning, when the streets still belonged to the streetlights, and he finished when the manifest said he could, and not 1 minute before. "Tell me that transmission sound is the radio," said Lonnie Burkhart, the driver 2 bays down, on a cold Tuesday at the depot. "Tell me you did not haul 600 pounds of saline up Route 9 with a truck singing like that." "She likes to sing," Sam said, and swung up into the cab. "That's not singing. That's a death rattle with a heater." Sam only smiled and pulled the door shut. The truck was 14 years old, and it sounded every year of it. He kept it alive the way he kept most things alive, with patience and a socket set and a stubborn refusal to make it anyone else's problem. That was the whole shape of the man, if you only looked once. Rooms forgot him. He had worked hard for years at being forgettable. At home he was somebody else entirely. At home he was the tall man folded into a chair 2 sizes too small at a kitchen table, checking spelling homework with the grave attention of a man auditing a bank. "Necessary," said Piper Delaney, age 8, not bothering to look up. "1 C, 2 S's. Everybody misses it." "I didn't miss it." "You missed it last week. I watched you." "That was a test," Sam said. "I was checking whether you'd catch it." "You were not," Piper said, and rolled her eyes with her entire head, and the kitchen filled up with the particular warmth of two people who are each other's whole roster. On the refrigerator door, under a strawberry-shaped magnet, there was a photograph of a laughing woman with dark hair, her head tipped back, and beside it, a crayon drawing of the same woman, because Piper drew her mother the way other children drew superheroes. From memory that was more borrowed than her own. From the careful versions of her that Sam handed down one at a time, like good dishes taken out only for company, so they would not chip. His last stop most days was Stanek's Pharmacy, a corner store with a hand-painted sign that had said Stanek's in the same green letters since 1994. He carried the stock in through the back, and Gloria Stanek, 63 years old and sharp as a new blade, checked it in against the invoice with a pencil she kept tucked behind her ear like the 20th century had never quite ended. And on the last Friday of every month, something else happened at that counter. Something with no invoice and no paperwork at all. Sam would wait until the store had emptied out, until it was just the two of them and the hum of the coolers. Then he would slide a worn envelope across the counter, and Gloria would take it and slide it into the drawer beneath the register without opening it, without a word about what was inside. "Same as always," she would say. "Same as always," he answered. 6 years, 72 envelopes, not one word of explanation to anyone. To understand the envelopes, you have to go back before them, to a diner counter in the fall of 2013, where a 23-year-old delivery driver stopped in for coffee at the end of a double shift and met a waitress named Lena. She laughed with her head tipped back, like the joke had earned her whole spine, and Sam Delaney, who had spent his life being quiet in loud rooms, found that he would say almost anything to hear it again. They were married within the year. They were broke the entire time, and mostly did not notice, the way you do not notice weather when you are young and in love, and certain the sun is a personal friend. The apartment was one bedroom over a laundromat, and the heat in the walls worked only when it felt generous. Sam used to say that all their decades of happiness got drawn up at that wobbly kitchen table, over tea gone cold. The diagnosis came the same year as the wedding, a congenital heart condition, the kind that hides quietly inside a healthy young woman until a routine checkup goes looking and finds it. There were pills for it. They mostly worked, and they always cost money. And then there was the winter of 2015, the one Sam never talked about and never once stopped thinking about. Work had gone thin that year. The depot cut everyone's hours and called it a slow season. Rent did not care what the depot called it, and on one gray afternoon in a chain pharmacy across town, Sam Delaney stood at a counter and counted out every dollar and every coin he had in the world, and it was $11 short of his wife's heart medication. He would remember the exact number for the rest of his life. "It's fine, Sam," Lena said, taking his arm, already turning him gently toward the door, because she could read a register line faster than anyone he ever knew. "Half doses, just till payday. People do it all the time. It's fine." 9 days. That was how long they split the pills in half at the kitchen table with a paring knife, until the next paycheck finally landed. 9 days out of a marriage that lasted 6 years. He used to tell himself it was nothing. Lena died in the spring of 2020. Piper was 2. The doctors were clear and they were kind, and they said the same true thing in 4 different ways so that it would fit through whatever door he had left open. The condition had simply run its course. It was always going to end this way. Nothing about that winter, nothing about those 9 days, changed the outcome by a single hour. The arithmetic of that counter, one doctor told him, had no remainder. He carried the remainder anyway. Some men carry a thing like that as anger. Sam carried it as a question, and the question would not let him sleep. How many other people, right now, tonight, were standing at some counter under some ugly light, $11 short, with someone they loved zipped up inside a white paper bag just out of reach? In September of 2020, 5 months after the funeral, Sam walked into Stanek's near closing and set the first envelope on the counter. Inside was overtime money, saved a shift at a time. On the outside, there was nothing written at all. If anyone comes up short, he said, it comes out of this. Anyone, whatever it is, whatever they need, and you never, ever say my name. You just tell them it's Lena's tab. Gloria Stanek had owned that corner for 26 years by then, and she had seen every kind of person a register can reveal, the generous and the grasping and the ashamed. She looked at the young widower in the delivery jacket for a long, long moment, reading him the way she read everyone. And what do I tell them when it runs out? It won't run out. She did not argue. She reached under the counter and took out a ledger, a plain black book, and turned to a clean page and wrote 4 letters at the top in a steady hand. Lena. Then she ruled a straight line beneath the name, and the tab was open. Now come back to the spring morning of the coins and watch the whole of it again, knowing what the man in the faded jacket knew. Sam had finished his delivery through the back and had come around to the front to stand in line with a bottle of children's chewable vitamins. Because Piper had entered a phase of eating only beige food, he was not looking for anything. Then he saw the coins go down in rows. He saw the folded 5, soft as cloth. He saw the tech's young face do the thing that faces do when the math simply will not come together. And he saw a small white bag under the lamp with a child's inhaler inside it, close enough to touch, not paid for yet. He had been that person. He would be that person again in his dreams for the rest of his life. $11 short with his whole world stapled to a bag. So he leaned in, past the young mother's shoulder, and what he whispered to Gloria was this: whatever she's short, put it on Lena's tab, and do not tell her it was me. He was already turning away before the register beeped. It was practiced. In 6 years, not one person had ever connected the quiet man who delivered the gauze to the word on their receipt, and Sam intended to keep it that way until the day they buried him next to Lena. What he had not planned for, what no amount of practice had prepared him for, was the woman herself. Her name was Callie Monroe. She was 30 years old. She worked as an aide at the community clinic 3 blocks over while she studied nights for her nursing license. Flashcards rubber-banded in the console of her car. She had a 6-year-old son named Oscar, whose lungs seized up every spring like a cold engine, and she loved that boy with a ferocity that had rearranged her entire life around his breathing. She was also, by long practice and a childhood full of hard lessons, a person who did not accept help. Help, in her experience, always arrived carrying a ledger of its own. That night, with Oscar breathing easy and asleep down the hall, Callie sat at her kitchen table and looked at the receipt for a long time. Lena. She turned the single word over in her mind like a coin she could not spend. She typed it into her phone and searched, and there was nothing to find. That absence was the entire design. "I pay my own way," she said out loud, to an empty kitchen, and the sentence came out sounding less true than it used to, and that shook her more than the kindness had. 3 days later, at the elementary school gate, a small boy with an inhaler in his backpack traded a green plastic dinosaur eraser to a girl with dark hair and her mother's exact laugh, and the two of them decided, with the terrifying efficiency of children, that they were now best friends and no adult would be consulted. "Dad, this is Oscar," Piper announced that Friday, dragging the boy over by the sleeve. "He knows the names of 40 dinosaurs, and his mom gives real answers when you ask her questions, not fake grown-up answers." Sam looked up. There at the gate stood the woman from the counter, holding her son's forgotten jacket. Callie looked at the tall man crouched beside Piper, and something tugged at the far edge of her memory, faint as a radio playing in another room. A faded jacket, somebody standing behind her in a line once. "Callie," she said, and put out her hand. "Sam," he said, and shook it, and did not run, though everything in him was quietly begging to. The first repayment envelope arrived at Stanex the following Monday. $11 exactly, taped shut, no note inside. Gloria held it up to the light and let out a long breath, the sigh of a woman who could recognize wounded pride the moment it came through her door. She had been keeping a proud man's secret for 6 years. Now she was going to have to keep a proud woman's, too. The letter from Corvus Health Partners arrived in April, printed on paper too heavy and too fine for the news it carried. They were acquiring Stanex, along with 9 other independent pharmacies in the county. The words in the press release were transition and continuity and valued community presence. The real words were on page 2 in the smaller type. All informal accounts and unwritten arrangements to be terminated at the point of transfer. Gloria slid the letter across the counter to Sam the same way he had slid 72 envelopes toward her over the years. 60 days, she said. The tab dies with the sale, Sam. Unless it is funded ahead of time, in writing, sitting formal in the store account when the new man turns his key in the door. They will honor a line item. They will not honor a handshake. How much to carry it through the changeover? She wrote a figure on the back of the letter and turned it around. It was a number with a comma in it. That same week, the truck stopped singing and started coughing in earnest. A hard mechanical knock that no socket set was going to talk out of it. The garage put it up on the lift, and the man came back out wiping his hands, wearing the exact face a doctor wears walking toward the wrong waiting room. $2,300. The transmission was finished, and it was not a question of whether, only when. "Ride with me till you get it sorted," Lonnie said back at the depot. "I'll even let you pick the radio station. That is how sorry I feel for you." Piper heard more than Sam ever thought she heard. She started leaving her allowance quarters on his dresser, one at a time, without a word of comment. He would find them at night, 4 or 5 silver coins in the lamplight, and it very nearly took him apart in a way the dead transmission never could have. And across the neighborhood, Callie Monroe had opened an investigation. She came into Stanex on a Thursday with her chin set at a determined angle, put her returned envelope down on the counter between them, and looked Gloria dead in the eye. "I want a name. Whoever is doing this, I want to pay them back, all of it, and then I want them to stop. I don't need a benefactor. I need it to stop." "No," Gloria said, mild as milk. in the way that only somebody's grandmother can land the word. "I am not a charity case, Mrs. Stanek." "I never for 1 second thought you were," Gloria said. She set down her pencil. "This was never about whether you could pay, honey. It is about a counter, a long time ago, and $11. And a man who never once got the chance to stand behind the woman he loved when it counted. You just happened to stand where it still hurts him. That is the entire crime, and there is no jail for it." Callie left the store angrier than she came in, and a great deal more curious, which is a dangerous combination for the life expectancy of any secret. 2 days later, her envelope came back to her own mailbox, unopened, with her name spelled correctly on the front and nothing inside it but her own $11. That night, Sam sat alone in the cab of the dead truck outside his building, running the only arithmetic there was. The transmission fund in his savings held 6 years of overtime, put away one shift at a time. $2,900. It was enough to fix the truck. Or it was enough to carry Lena's tab clean through the sale, with a little left over to start the jar in the fridge again. It was not enough for both. It was never, from the very first, going to be enough for both. Here is the thing that ought to be said plainly about the decision, because the people it eventually reached would spend a long time afterward marveling at it, unable to make it sit right in their heads. It took him 4 minutes. He sat in the bank parking lot for one of those minutes. He thought about Lena at the diner counter with her head tipped back mid-laugh. He thought about a white bag under a lamp and a small boy's lungs closing in the spring, and a ledger page with 4 careful letters ruled at the top. Then he walked inside and he moved the money. The teller knew what the fund was for, because Sam had mentioned the truck exactly once in 6 years of small talk. She looked down at the withdrawal slip, then up at his face, then down at the slip again. "You sure about this, Mr. Delaney?" This is the whole thing. Trucks get fixed," Sam said. "Counters don't wait." He brought Gloria the envelope on a Friday that was not the last Friday of the month, and it was thick enough that he had to hand it across with both hands. She took it, and she opened the drawer, and then she stopped. And for the first time in 6 years, she broke the form they had kept so carefully between them. "Sam, your truck. Everybody on the route knows about your truck." "You heard about that?" "Of course I heard about it. Lonnie Burkhart narrates your entire life to this store like it is the morning news." Sam almost smiled. "The tab gets funded all the way through the sale," he said. "That is the deal I made. That part is not up for a vote." "You made that deal with yourself, Sam. Nobody would ever hold you to it." "Those are the only ones you really have to keep," he said. He tapped the counter once, the way a man knocks on wood, and he told her good night, and he walked out into the evening. He walked home the long way, because walking was simply what there was now. Piper met him at the corner, the way she always did, and they played the game where you must not step on any of the cracks, and he lost with tremendous and theatrical dignity, and she laughed with her head tipped all the way back. He stopped walking for just a second, the way he always did when her mother came up through her face like that. Sudden weather. Gone before you could point at it. That night, the savings ledger at the bank read 0, and the man responsible for it slept better and deeper than he had in weeks. Nobody who heard the story later would quite believe that part. It was true anyway. Gloria Stanek retired on the second Saturday of June, and the whole neighborhood came out to see her off, which is to say the store could not begin to hold them all, and after a while simply stopped trying to. There was a sheet cake on the counter where the register receipts usually curled and printed. There were 50 years of customers wedged shoulder to shoulder between the narrow aisles. And there was the new pharmacist, a serious and slightly overwhelmed young man named Evan Rao, being introduced to more people in a single hour than he had likely met in the whole year before, every one of them telling him the identical thing. Do not change anything, please. Not one single thing about this place. Sam stood at the very back near the door, holding his coffee like an anchor line, already planning the polite moment when he could slip out. Callie was 3 or 4 aisles away with Oscar riding on her hip, because school friendships meant the two families came to things together now. Piper was somewhere near the cake, conducting reconnaissance with clear strategic intent. Gloria did not give a long speech. She thanked the neighborhood for 40 years of trusting her with their worst days. The 3 a.m. phone calls, the prescriptions filled on a promise. Then she reached under the counter and took out something and set it down beside the cake, and the room went quiet on its own without being asked. It was a ledger, old, its black cover gone soft and gray at the edges, swollen thick with use, the corners rounded off from years of hands. "Before I hand this store over," she said, "I am going to commit one small crime against a very good man. I have been looking forward to it for about 6 years." The room stilled further, leaning in. "For 6 years now, there has been a tab in this store. If you came up short at that counter, and I am looking at a few of you right now who did, your balance just went quiet, and your receipt came out with a single word where the number should have been. Some of you kept that receipt. I know, because you came back and asked me whose kindness it was, and I looked you in the eye and I lied to your face. And I would do it again tomorrow. Gladly." She laid her hand flat on the ledger as if she were being sworn in. 214 times, she said. 214 strangers, over 6 years, every one of them covered by one man out of his overtime pay, in worn envelopes he handed me on the last Friday of every month. He asked me for exactly one thing in return. No name, not ever. She smiled, and it wobbled at the edges. "Well, I retired as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I never once promised anybody a single thing past 4 o'clock. She looked toward the back of the store. "Her name was Lena," Gloria said, and her voice did not so much break as bend. She loved a young man who was $11 short at a counter one bad winter, and she never once made him feel small about it. And then she died anyway, far too young, and he decided that the rest of you should never have to learn what that particular counter feels like under your hands. He is standing right by the door. He has been trying to leave for 10 minutes, and if he makes it out before you thank him, then frankly, none of you deserve the man." Every head in the store turned at once. Sam Delaney stood very still in his faded jacket, holding his paper cup of coffee, pinned in place by 200 pairs of eyes. He looked exactly like a man who had spent 6 patient years rehearsing how to be invisible, and had never once rehearsed for this. The applause did not build the way applause usually builds. It arrived all at once, like a window thrown open, and inside it people were reaching for his hand and saying names, their own names, the months their receipts had come from. A woman he had covered in February was crying openly into her coffee. Bree the tech was crying and not bothering to hide it. Gloria was not even pretending to try. And then the crowd parted, and Callie Monroe was standing directly in front of him, her son on her hip, the receipt from that spring morning held in her free hand, the one she had almost thrown away a dozen times and never could. Her face was doing 4 things at once, and not one of them anymore was anger. "You were behind me," she said, "in the line. That whole time you were standing right behind me." Sam looked at the receipt, then at her. "You weren't supposed to find out," he said helplessly. And the entire front of the store laughed at that, warm and wet-eyed, and after a second, so did she, with the tears finally coming loose. The neighborhood took in the news the way neighborhoods do, not all at once, but slowly, in 100 small corrections made at 100 kitchen tables over the following week. Dwayne Pratt took it in first. He was the man from the line, the one who had sighed at a mother counting her coins, and he had been standing in the store when the ledger came out. He went home very quiet that afternoon, and he was back outside the doors at 7 the next morning. He did not apologize out loud, because men built like Dwayne apologize in currency, not in sentences. He put 5 $20 bills into the jar that had appeared on the counter overnight, a mason jar labeled in a child's careful marker, "Lena's tab, everyone welcome." Then he nodded once at the jar and left for work, without waiting for anyone to thank him. Evan Rao took it in through paperwork, which was how he took in most things. The tab went into the transfer documents as a formal, seated store fund, and Corvus itself put the first money in, once their regional manager heard the whole story from 3 different employees in a single week. "First thing they teach you in pharmacy school is drug interactions," Evan told Sam, shaking his hand across the counter that was now, on paper, his. "Nobody teaches you this one. The account stays. Same word on the receipt. I already had them program it in." And Callie Monroe took it in on the bench outside the store, on a warm evening near the end of June, sitting next to Sam with 2 paper cups of coffee cooling between them, because she had bought them both and would not hear otherwise. "I need you to understand something about me," she said, watching the street instead of his face. "I do not take charity. I never have, not since I was old enough to say no. It is how I was raised, and it has mostly done me no favors, and it is still mine, and I am keeping it." "I know," Sam said. "I read the envelope. All $11 of it." She laughed despite herself, a short, surprised sound, then went serious again, turning her cup in her hands. "So then tell me why I am allowed to take this one. Because I have been trying to give it back for 2 months and I can't seem to." Sam was quiet for a while, watching the same street she was. Then he told her, all of it, the diner counter and the head tipped back, the diagnosis the same year as the wedding ring, the gray afternoon in 2015, the $11, the 9 days of half doses, and the remainder he had carried out of that hospital and could not set down until he found a way to set it down 1 envelope at a time for 6 years. It was never charity, he said, looking down at his hands, at the grease worn permanently into the creases. "It's a memorial. That is all it ever was. You just happened to stand at her counter, $11 short, same as us." He turned the cup once more. "When I saw the coins going down in rows, I wasn't deciding anything. I was just 25 years old again. And somebody, finally, was standing behind us." Callie was quiet for a long time after that. Her hand found the receipt in her jacket pocket and pressed it flat. "Okay," she said at last. It was a very small word, and it was carrying an enormous amount of quiet unlearning behind it. "Okay, then thank you. Him, her. Okay." The truck died completely on a Tuesday in July at the depot, in the gray before the sun, with a single sound like a dropped toolbox, and then nothing at all. Lonnie towed it over to the route mechanic's shop, and for a week, Sam rode shotgun on his own deliveries, calling out turns to a man who had been driving these same streets for 20 years and received every direction as a personal insult. But the harder reckoning that week did not happen at the depot. It happened at his own kitchen table. Piper had been at the retirement party. She had stood by the cake and heard every single word Gloria said. And being 8, she had spent the days since assembling the whole story quietly, the way she assembled her jigsaw puzzles, saying nothing until she had enough of it to see the picture. "The tab is Mom," she said one evening, overspelling homework that was not getting done. It was not a question. She said it the way you say a thing you have already checked twice. The word on all the receipts. "That's Arlena. That means everybody at that whole party knows about Mom now." Sam set down his pencil. He had spent 6 careful years keeping Alina's name small enough to fit on a single ruled line in a ledger, one quiet syllable handed across a counter after closing time. His daughter had just, in one sentence, made that name the size of an entire neighborhood, and she was sitting there, smiling about it. "They know a part of her," he said, choosing the words the way he chose everything, carefully. "The part I could afford to give them." "That's the best part, though," Piper said, with the devastating certainty that only an 8-year-old can bring to a kitchen table. "The helping part. She would like that. She would really like that people cry about her at parties." She looked back down at her homework and then added, as an afterthought, that was not an afterthought, "I'm glad it isn't a secret anymore. Secrets are heavy. You look less tired now." He got up and made cocoa that neither of them had asked for, because a man needs something to do with his hands when his 8-year-old walks him gently to the truth, like that. That night, after she was asleep, he found a single-dollar bill on top of the envelope drawer, weighted down by the strawberry-shaped magnet, in handwriting he knew as well as his own. For Mom's tab. He stood in the dark kitchen holding it for a long time. Grief and peace, it turns out, fit inside the very same evening. You find it out yourself, standing at a drawer at midnight, holding a child's dollar. The mechanics finished with the truck on a Friday. When Sam came by the shop after his last delivery to hear the bad news about a transmission he could no longer afford to replace, the truck was idling in the bay instead, running smoother and quieter than it had in 5 years. A rebuilt transmission had come off a donor rig that had been sitting dead in the yard. 11 pairs of hands he could name, and several more he could not, had spent 3 evenings after their own shifts putting it in. When he insisted on an invoice, what they handed him was a scrap of cardboard taped to the dash, in Lonnie Burkhart's blocky capital letters. "Counters don't wait. Neither do we." He tried to argue. He was badly outnumbered, and the shop foreman turned up the radio. In August, Callie Monroe passed her licensing exam and stood through a short ceremony in the lobby of the community clinic, while Oscar clapped for her like it was the deciding game of the playoffs. Her first paycheck as a licensed nurse went to exactly 4 places. Rent. Oscar's fall inhaler, paid at full sticker price, at Stanex, at the counter, in cash, with her chin held level. Groceries. And a small lockbox at the front desk of the clinic, set beneath a hand-lettered card she had made with Oscar's markers the night before. Lena's tab, same rules. If a mother came up short at the clinic counter, her balance would quietly go still, and she would leave with a receipt that carried one word where a number should have been, and no one would ever tell her whose paycheck had covered it. She told Gloria before anyone, driving out to the little house on the edge of town where retirement was not taking especially well. Gloria read the card through twice, and then the toughest register hand in the neighborhood's history had to sit down at her own kitchen table for a minute. 2 counters now, she said finally, pressing the card flat with both hands. Oh, that girl. She would be absolutely beside herself. As for Sam and Callie, the whole neighborhood watched it happen the way you watch bread rise in a warm kitchen, which is to say that nobody could point to the exact moment it turned, and yet everybody saw the result. 2 children at one kitchen table on Saturday mornings, pancakes stacked in wildly unequal towers. Coffee poured without anybody having to ask how he took it, because she had simply learned. A clinic nurse who reached out and fixed the crooked collar of a delivery driver's jacket at the school gate, absently, mid-sentence, the way you tend to something that has quietly become your own. Nobody called it anything at all. It did not need a name yet. Some tabs run on nothings but trust for years and years before anybody gets around to writing them down. On a Saturday at the very end of summer, Piper set the table for pancakes and laid out 4 plates without being asked to. Sam looked down at the 4th plate and then over at his daughter, who looked right back up at him with her mother coming through her whole face like the morning coming up over the rooftops. "What?" Piper said, entirely reasonable about it. "Oscar's staying over, and his mom always says she isn't hungry and then eats half of yours anyway. You know she does." That was all. That was everything. The first week of September, a stranger came into Stonex near closing time. A man in worn work boots, holding a prescription for his elderly father, with not quite enough in his account to cover it. He was counting what he had out on the counter, apologizing as he went, as if an empty wallet were a moral failing he owed the room an explanation for. Bree did what the techs at Stonex had always done, and what the tech at the clinic 3 blocks over now did too. She glanced at the shortfall, and she keyed the quiet code that Evan had built into the new register, and the machine gave its small, merciful beep. "You're covered," she said. "Been covered here a long time." The man looked down at his receipt, at the single word where a balance should have been, and he asked the question they always ask. Bree only smiled and folded the top of the white paper bag and put it into his hands. In the drawer beneath the register, the old ledger was full now and retired, same as its keeper. A new book had been started in a young pharmacist's precise hand. 214 had become 306 between the 2 counters, and the number climbed a little higher every month, fed by a mason jar, a store fund, a nurse's paycheck, a delivery driver's overtime, and the loose bills of a neighborhood that had finally learned what that word on the receipt meant. Sam Delaney still came through the back door most afternoons with the gauze and the glucose strips, and most people let him go on being forgettable, which he appreciated far more than he had ever appreciated the applause. Neither tab ever carried his name. They carried hers. Lena's tab never closed.